All right, come to order here. Hi. Whoa, good. Thank you. All right. Very good. Thank you. This is fun to cap off our day today. We've had a huge travel festival. I think we've had 20 different classes in 3 different venues, and we've had 1,000 of our tour alumni getting together for 4 different parties at the Edmonds Conference Center. And now I'm ready to just kick back and give you the irreverent history of Europe through the back door. How did that little dork come to be a travel writer? Okay. Just so I know who's here and so on. How many of you are in this room for your first time today? Raise your hands, please. How many of you are people who have taken one of our tours before and here for the alumni party? Very nice. How many people are from out of state? Very nice. How many people are from the other side of the Atlantic Ocean? The peanut gallery. We call that the peanut gallery here in the United States. Where does that come from? Is that the peanut? Oh, howdy doody. Okay. These are our guides up here, so I'm glad you guys are here. And I don't know quite what I'm going to be saying for the next hour or 90 minutes. I don't know if it's going to last an hour or 90 minutes. Hope it doesn't last longer than that. But thank you for being here, and it's a little bit presumptuous to think that my story would be of interest, but we've had so much fun in the last 30 years of showing people around Europe. I thought I would just sort of dig up a bunch of slides and put them together. I'll apologize in advance for not being perfectly in order and all that kind of thing, but it's fun to share it. And I'm really thankful to have a little niche where I can do what I love. It just gives me energy. I can give talks like this all day long and just actually feel pretty good after a day of work like this. And so thanks for being here. Okay, I'll just take you right back to the start. This is the irreverent history of Europe through the back door. Okay, I never wanted to go to Europe. My dad used to be a piano tuner, and some guy said you should import pianos. So he decided to import the finest pianos in the world from Germany. And he said, we're going to Germany to see the piano factories. I was 14 years old, and I thought, that is one stupid idea. And I got over there, I was a 14-year-old with a bad attitude. I just thought this is ridiculous. These people don't even speak my language. I can't even get a Coke when I need one. And on about day 3, it occurred to me, this is not all that bad. There was different pop, different candy. I remember there was one-armed bandits in the hotel lobbies. I could actually gamble. I distinctly remember statuesque women with hairy armpits. And I was running around Germany and Austria seeing these great piano factories, and then we'd go up to see relatives up in Norway. That was when I was 14 years old. In fact, this shot right here, here's my mom, and my dad must have taken the photograph. This man was from Bösendorfer, the finest pianos in the world. Bösendorfer bragged that there was, the most expensive pianos made in Vienna. They said they didn't crank out pianos. It was like they birthed pianos. It was actually in a former monastery in Vienna, and they would crank out 2 pianos per man per year. That was their production. Whereas Yamaha would produce as many pianos in 1 month as Bösendorfer produced in 100 years. And we went there and saw the old German craftsmanship. And my dad was just, Mr. Piano here in Seattle. And for him to go there, and I remember at that age, the excuse for bringing me over there is I could play the piano better than my dad. Every one of these handmade pianos had its own personality. My dad was their piano tuner. These people paid big bucks for this piano. We'd go over to Vienna. They would line up 6 or 7 of these big shiny grands. I would play each one. My dad would analyze the character of the tone. He would choose which one fit the musical taste of his customer here in Seattle, and he would autograph the sounding board. They'd put it in a box and ship it to Seattle. That was the quality kind of thing, and people lovingly, did lined up all the screws and aged the wood, and they even tuned the shanks for the hammers, so everything was just right on these incredible Bösendorfers. So I got to go there and enjoy that craftsmanship of Germany, and that sort of impressed me. When I look back on it, I wasn't very aware at the time, but certain things were having an impact on me. Also, these 2 men here, we had done our piano work, and they were taking us out now to the border of Hungary on the Neusiedler Sea, and it was Cold War time, 1969, and we met these old guys, and this man told me he witnessed the assassination of the Archduke Ferdinand in Sarajevo in 1914. Whether that was true or not, I believed him. I imagine it was true. And I'll never forget, we were in the church in the village, and after church, everybody walked across the dusty square right into the tavern. It was all the generations, grandma, the kids, everybody, from church straight over to the tavern, pour the rustic wine, smear lard on rough bread, eat it, and tell stories that go back to World War I. And I was just wide-eyed. And I went home and got a degree in history, just like a kid taking stories. It was like storytelling. I got a history degree accidentally because I was so turned on by history from meeting guys like that. So that was when I look back on it at the very beginning. I didn't want to go on that first trip. They took me again 2 years later. I was in the train station in Copenhagen with my mom and dad heading up to the relatives in Norway, surrounded by kids a couple years older than me with rucksacks and Eurail passes, exciting destinations clicking up on the Riedel board, Copenhagen, Oslo, Berlin, Amsterdam. I saw those kids free as the wind. And I remember looking at my mom and dad and distinctly thinking, I don't need you guys for this. Europe can be my playground, like all those other kids with their backpacks and Eurail passes. So I vowed to go back to Europe every other year since I graduated from high school. I think this has taken probably the day I graduated from high school in 1973 here in Edmonds, heading off to Europe. My parents said, you can go to Europe, but you have to have a buddy, and you can't go to Turkey. So I had to find a buddy, and I didn't go to Turkey. I went to Morocco, which is actually more dangerous, but they didn't know that. Back then, when you look back into your childhood and you put back the pieces together, there's not much photography from those days, but this is the only shot I got of my youth, and on the bookshelf here, it's Europe on $5 a day. So that was the only guidebook really back then. I mean, it was tough from a guidebook information point of view, and I was going over there on a shoestring. So this is my good buddy Gene Openshaw. And we both had our backpacks with the external frames. I got the biggest backpack I could find, and I remember thinking, how can I fill this baby up? I had way too much. We had a tube tent, we had a mess kit, I had a metal tin on the top filled with books and stuff, and it was ridiculous how heavy we traveled. But we were going over there and we had $2.50 a day each for 70 days in Europe, a 10-week trip. Our airplane ticket cost us $250. Our 2-month student Eurail pass cost us $180, and the whole thing probably cost us, $500 or $600 for 10 weeks in Europe. I remember that as my very best trip ever. It's the irony is that the less money you have, the more close to the ground you are. And even back then, it impressed me how this could be really the good kind of travel. So we're at Boeing Airfield, flying to Europe on one of those charter flights with Sons of Norway or something like that, and saying goodbye to family and girlfriends and all that, and then we're off in Europe. And to be 18 years old with just wide eyes and no parents within thousands of miles and a Eurail pass where you can just go wherever you want, it was a great trip. We were very poor, and we didn't have fruit until the fall when fruit was ripe in the trees and we could take it, And I remember Gene and I we were like street urchins in Europe. We would sneak out of hotels without paying. One of us would pay for a single, and the other person would sleep on the floor. It was that kind of stuff. It was really disgusting travel, but it was survival. I mean, we finally finished the trip. I remember on the last day we had no rail pass. It had expired. We didn't have money to get to the airport, so we're freeloading on the train going out to the Frankfurt airport. Conductor's coming down the train this way. And you're like 3 stops away, and the conductors are both coming closer and closer. And you're hoping you're going to get there, and you can jump out before the conductors meet each other. And you're kind of going to the middle of the middle. And just at the Frankfurt airport, we just be able to jump out with our expired Eurail passes and so on. But we had this budget where we knew we had like $2.50 a day. And every week we'd put all of our shekels on the bed, and we'd add it up and divide it by how many days we had left. And we'd think, we have to go a little tighter now. We would see how many hours we could go without spending a penny. And we would go, a couple of days without spending. And people knew which smorgasbords you could go to and take food away and all this sort of thing. One smorgasbord was famous for having food to take away. And finally, they put uncooked eggs where we thought the hard-boiled eggs were, and we had a very bad lesson after that, and so on. But I had the blessing of having relatives in Norway, and we got down to being able to live on one sandwich a day. We'd go up to the relatives in Norway, and they'd feed us so much that we were hungry then again, 3 meals a day. But you can starve yourself down to 1 meal a day. That was before I had any sense of nutrition. It was just baguettes with jam, like strawberry jam, and Fanta. That was our diet. And Jean was Mormon, so every time somebody would buy us a coffee or a Coke, I would have 2. And we would, and so we'd go to Norway. This is our relatives in Norway, where we'd just feast. And back then, of course, you didn't have any way to keep touch of your neighbors. You'd go to, and you'd have mail stops. You'd go to relatives or American Express to pick up your mail. We went into Eastern Europe, and this was Cold War time. And I remember back then remembering I wanted to talk to people, but the only people who could be open and talk to us were people who had chosen to live their life with nothing to lose. When you don't have anything, you don't have anything to lose. So the bottom rung of society could talk to Westerners. Consequently, we got to talk to a lot of people like this guy, just hammer and sickle workers, rather than anybody who had an important job in the society, and really gained a fascinating insight into the struggles of people in communist Eastern Europe. This might have been the next summer, because we're in Turkey here, and I remember going into Turkey and going far into the middle and the east of Turkey, and it was just mind-blowing how exotic and untouched it was. You'd be in towns where nobody had ever met an American, and I remember going into the at the hotel, and I gave a man my postcard, and I thought he would mail it for me, and he looked at it and he said, "Very good," and he gave it back to me. And we'd be sitting there at a rest stop, and everybody, we'd be eating a honeydew melon shaped like a football, and everybody's staring at us. So finally we decided, well, let's just hike it and go out for a pass, and we'd show them a little bit about American culture. But constantly, you'd be sitting there writing in your journal, you'd look up, and people were just gathered around, staring at you like they're like you're from another planet. And this was a very exciting opportunity to just broaden my little perspective. And I remember even back then, I mean, I did every summer 10 weeks, long before I was doing this for any kind of work. I used to be a piano teacher, and kids wouldn't practice in the summer, so I'll see you in September, and I'm going to Europe. And I had a passion for, a big ritual for me was buying an empty book with a hard bound. I hate those steno books with the spiral notebooks. People write all their stuff in, and it's like a thing that you stick in your office drawer. I wanted a hard-bound, empty book, and I lovingly filled every page. And I've still got those from every year, and that was way before I had any inkling I would be anything other than a piano teacher. But I had this passion for writing stuff down in my journal. I also had a passion for surviving on no money. And just all across Europe, it was just Europe through the gutter back then. And I learned a lot of good tricks. I mean, there's musicians all over Europe playing beautiful music and offering people money, so I could go up and, and at cafeterias, there's all sorts of food for free on racks. Perfectly good salads. I mean, lots left, and and I found, dirt cheap hotels. I mean, non-government regulated flop houses where for $6 you could get a bed and a kitten tossed in for no extra. That was my beautiful bag. I loved that little rucksack, and that's what I lived out of every year for the summer months. I found very cheap places. I was always excited about traveling the whole world. I went to India, and and I found India really, really interesting. In fact, India is my favorite country. I like to say that because people think it's Europe, but I just love India. It rearranges all your cultural furniture. It wallops your ethnocentricity. But India is such a personal experience, I really wouldn't want to teach it. It's a magical place. I'm all for going there. But I ended up, teaching in Europe, and but I just love India. You stop in a little village and get a shave, and everybody just gathers around, and it's a festival. But I found Europe is the place I wanted to teach. To me, Europe is the wading pool for world exploration. It's the first place to go, and if I was going to teach a place, I needed to teach an area where there'd be a lot of people going, and that would be a springboard for other travels. So I ended up calling my little business Europe Through the Back Door, and I was always fascinated by these doors that you could go through. This particular door was sort of the model. It was on the first cover of my Europe Through the Back Door books, and that is part of the ruins at Tintagel. And Tintagel is on the southwest coast of England, the birthplace of King Arthur, a very evocative place. Back then I used to wear a t-shirt that says, "I'm not a tourist, I live here." And I really wanted to, of course I was a tourist and I was just a vagabond American, but I wanted to try to sort of not be a tourist. I wanted to really sort of live there. I was teaching in the experimental college at the University of Washington, and I found myself just spending lunches in the dorm helping people travel, and it was really clear to me that there needs to be some information organized. I remember I was going to take the bus from Kathmandu, or from Istanbul all the way to Kathmandu. I was so excited about this trip. My best buddy and I were going to go on this trip, and a guy in the experimental college. This is, the goofy little college in association with the formal college where they teach bike maintenance, square dancing, log cabin building, how to eat slugs, this kind of stuff, and how to travel. And this guy had a class called the bus to India from Istanbul or something. And I went to the class, and he had been there and he had done it all, and I was heading off. And he was so sloppy and lazy and ill-prepared to share his precious knowledge from experience with all of these travelers that were going to do it themselves. And I remember thinking right there, wow, he had the information, he didn't care to design it and share it, and all of us were lesser for it. It really hurt us all in what we could have done in the area of efficiency with our experience coming up. And it sort of inspired me to recognize the value of good information. So I thought I would put together a class. And I remember I said, okay, I'll sign up for a class. It was going to be every Wednesday for 8 nights in a row, in 8 weeks in a row. And I thought, 20 or 30 students would sign up. 100 adults signed up, each of them paying $8. And I thought, I'm onto something here. I remember I left the dorm that first morning with 100 $2 bills. And I came home with basically 100 $10 bills. And I had my flight paid for just by going and showing slides and telling stories. That's back when I was 20 years old or something like that. What also struck me was it wasn't the kids that wanted the help. They'll go over there and screw around and make all sorts of mistakes and not even notice it and have a great time. It was their parents that wanted to use their time and their money more smartly. And ever since then, I have realized my information is for older travelers who want to travel young at heart. And I love it when younger travelers use our material, but I want to be accessible and help older travelers who want to be a little more risk averse have that youthful kind of experience traveling. So I made a class. It was called European Travel Cheap, and this was 1978 there. And we have England sort of personified. It says, "Feel my fjords and caress my castles." All right. So it was a very experiential Europe that we're talking about here. So we have "Feel my fjords, caress my castles." And back then, my dad was still importing pianos. And right on this same street, 4th Avenue, my dad had Steve's Sound of Music right there. And I used to teach piano there. And then this little studio became available, and I rented it. Back then it was $180 a month or something to rent a studio. And I taught piano there. Steve's Studios. In the front, I had my studio. A girlfriend of mine in the back was teaching piano. And in the center, we made a recital hall. And we would have our recitals there. And it was really a cool little business. I fully expected to spend my whole life teaching piano. I love teaching piano. I had the best piano students in town. I had like 40 or 50 students. That's how I paid for all of my college travels and my college tuition and all that. And my girlfriend and I were going to get married and move our grand pianos together. You know how pianos can nest that cute little way. And it was a very nice setup. You could work 30 hours a week and basically cut it off and take the summers off. And we had our recital hall here. And the kids would play and their parents would come. You know how that goes at Christmas time or the spring recital. And I also had a slide screen there. I would decorate it with this cool design during piano time, but I would also fill this hall with travelers. And we'd have a World Travelers Slide Club, met every month. I'd give my talks there. And slowly this became more of a travel information center than a recital hall on this same street right here, a couple hundred yards from us. And I really got into teaching people how to travel right there in our studio. Finally, I self-published the first Europe Through the Back Door in 1980. It was such a rough book, people thought it was a pre-publication edition. You know, I would try to get some publicity, say, "When's the book coming out?" "You're holding the book." And well, they say, "But it doesn't have an ISBN." And I go, "What's an ISBN?" But I wrote this book, and it was my lecture, basically. I remember my aunt said, "You should write a book," and I thought, that's a stupid idea. And most of my best ideas have been presented to me by somebody else, and at first I say no, but then I think about it, it's a great idea. And it was very easy to write the book, Europe Through the Back Door. I just gave my lectures from my university course to that, and it was right there. Today it's in its 30th edition, but it's sort of the same structure as before. All the skills, and then chapters highlighting my favorite back doors, you see. But anybody can write a book. You just gotta, get your girlfriend to type it and get your roommate to do all the art and have the information there. And then you need a couple $1,000s to buy a couple thousand books, and you're in business. So I gathered together all my money. I remember 2,000 copies. They cost me $1.25 each or something like that. And everywhere I went, I'd give talks and sell the book for $5 or $8 or something like that, and I was in business. But I remember thinking, am I going to be a piano teacher or a travel writer? And I had to do one or the other. I loved them both. And finally I decided I'm going to go travel teaching. I think it sounds a little more of an open-ended thing. And we bought the building where we're in today and turned it into a teaching area. And back then the technology was so crude. Thank goodness if you're any kind of a writer for computers. We had the very earliest Eagle computers, and I remember a Brother printer cost like $3,000 back then or something. It was so expensive and so crude compared to what we have today. But to have a way to do your work and not have to longhand write it out. I wrote my first couple books longhand and had to photocopy them in Europe, and then just so I had 2 copies of it. Later on, I would have it on a very crude. I remember my rucksack would almost be the entire rucksack would be my laptop, it took up the whole thing. And then every year it gets smaller and smaller. Now my laptop's in the outside pocket as a little Mac Air, But back then, it was just space age to be able to make a copy of the whole book. And I would just slip it into somebody's library and put a little note on it. If you find this after 1988, you can throw it away. But I needed that there in case I lost my disc before I got home and got the information to the publisher. But I was thankful for the computer, and we started our little business in the former piano studio. And I funded my early trips by getting 20 people together to take a Cosmos tour. So when I gave my lectures, I would say, if you want to join me on a Cosmos tour, you're welcome to do that. And a travel agent was selling them, and they give you, if you get a group, you get a free trip. And I didn't have any money because I was just a piano teacher, and it gave me my way to get to Europe. So my first couple of gigs as a guide was taking 20 or 25 people from Seattle on one of these big 50 people in a 50-seat Cosmos buses. This was tour number 3116 or something like that. And I just really enjoyed taking my little group in the context of a big, mainstream, crazy Cosmos tour, which is the notorious cheapest kind of tour where you pay a dirt cheap price and then they're selling you stuff and taking you shopping for kickbacks and all this kind of thing. And I learned how the tour business worked. I was the guide for this little group, which was a subgroup of the big group. I was just doing it for kicks. And there was an unfortunate guide that was trying to make a living on that bus. And every time he wanted to sell something, I would take everybody just for fun to the same place on the public transportation. And I remember the guide finally got me together, and in his thick German, he said, "You are a thorn in my side." Because the whole idea for a Cosmos tour is you keep your people in the dark so you can sell them the optional sightseeing. And it's a very good value because, the tour is so cheap and it's very efficient and all that, but they don't charge up front. They make their money by taking you shopping for kickbacks and selling you optional tours. Now, I just thought this is not a very straightforward way to do a tour experience for consumers, and I was starting to think maybe there's a better option. But I had a lot of fun back then just learning the ropes, spent a lot of time talking to tour guides and bus drivers, and the mass tourism really kind of got me down. Here, all these travelers are getting off of the boat long before the Channel in Belgium with a number. And they knew they were looking for bus number 3116. And they'd get off in Ostende or whatever, and then they'd go to the big bus lot and they'd find their tour guide, and they're off and running around Europe in that classic old tour. 50 people on a 50-seat bus. Now, what I like to do as the tour guide was gather a few people together. The big time guide would say, okay, for 10 marks, we're gonna meet at the hotel lobby and I'll take you down to the German slap dancing show and we'll go have a beer in a beer hall. And everybody would then look at me and I'd go, I'll just meet you after dinner. We'll pool our money. It's 3 marks each, and we'll take the trolley downtown, and we'll go to the beer hall where the Germans are drinking beer. So this is my sort of spirited way of organizing travel, but giving people a little bit of an option. So we'd go to the beer halls, and we'd have all sorts of fun. I would spend a lot of time hanging out with some of the group and getting to know the bus driver. And the bus drivers were very candid in telling me the inside story of how these tours worked. And when everybody's up at the castle, the bus drivers and the drivers and the guides are talking in the parking lot. And what do they talk about? I remember the word was lurks and perks. What's lurks and perks? It's how you sell your stuff. It's all the little tricks of the trade, And how do you sell? We take our groups to the champagne tour in Reims before we go into Paris, and then everybody's had their bubbly, and then we say, does anybody not want to buy the optional tours in Paris? Great, you're all on board. Let's go. And then they've just made a lot of good money. Every tour guide in Europe knows just where to park the bus in Lucerne for Swiss clock shopping. As soon as you park, you get $50 and a bottle of champagne, and half an hour later, everybody's done their shopping. They're back on the bus. The tour guide goes into the back room and gets 20% of whatever went into the till during that visit, you see. When tours drop off into town, they'll give you a little welcome sticker. Guten Tag, and it's in purple. And that means that's with this guide from that bus. So every time they buy something, the people with the purple one, it's a stroke tally over here and so on. So tourists need to understand how that works. And I was learning about this, and my little wheels were spinning on how we might be able to do an alternative. And I thought, here's people that these dear people have waited all their life for their retirement trip. I mean, this is the culmination of a lifetime of travel dreaming. And here they are in a royal palace in Vienna, sleeping because it's so lame and it's just so mass tourism. To me, this is what I call bland travel, all right? This, by the way, is a little tour company in Gibraltar run by a man who's got a much bigger ego than a marketing sense to put his name on the tour buses. This shot here represents big-time organized travel to me really vividly. Here we have a bunch of Americans. They got one day in Africa in their whole life. They're in Tangier, and they're in the same restaurant where all the other American tourists are going to be in Tangier and Morocco that day, talking with each other. You got your boy George belly dancer, of course, and it's just, to me, a lost opportunity. I wanted to take these, not all Americans, because frankly, most of these Americans who go on a tour like this, they go home satisfied. And who am I to say they didn't have a good trip? They never got out of their comfort zone. Everything was cool. They didn't get diarrhea. They got their little carpet and their bongo drums or whatever, and they go home. You can have an alternative. That's what I was looking for. I didn't want people's rest stop memories to be places like this that are designed for bus tours. I mean, this is great if you got 50 people on your bus. They serve American-style coffee. 30 people can go to the bathroom at the same time. They speak English, and your bus driver gets a little little punch on his card. And if he visits 10 times, he gets a carton of cigarettes. You see, now that's the screwy little things that shape the itinerary priorities of your typical big bus tour. And I just thought this is a travesty for people whose trips are so important. So I had that sort of inspiration when I was taking these big bus tours. Here we are in the Royal Palace in Vienna, where the local musicians are playing the Blue Danube all day long for tour groups coming and go unnoticed. I just thought, lame culture, and these tourists don't even know it. They're having a great time in something that's not as good as it could be. Also, I was making these discoveries. Just accidentally, I'd be out in the middle of nowhere in Greece and find myself a guest of honor at a Greek wedding festival. I'm sitting there in the front stump, dancing and drinking and eating with new Greek friends. There's not another tourist within 30 miles of me. And I think, why can't we take little groups to these kind of places? It's an opportunity, but you got to stay in a dumpy little bed and breakfast instead of a fancy American-style hotel. If you can handle that, you got Greece in your laps, and that makes it a better experience. Also, I was finding these wonderful back doors. This is what I had a passion for. Everywhere I was going, I was hiking up to this lead, following that lead, finding these dramatic ruined castles and beautiful spots. This is the Cinque Terre, and when I went to the Cinque Terre, it was truly undiscovered. I have really ruined that place, okay? I mean, now when people go to Italy, they're going to Rome, Venice, Florence, Siena, Cinque Terre. It's like it's on the checklist. And I haven't had that big of an impact on that many places, but there's 4 or 5 places in Europe where I've spent a lot of time trying to send people there. The beautiful thing about the Cinque Terre is it cannot handle a big bus tour because you can't get a big bus there. And there's no hotels of the standard of a typical big bus tour. So they're in Portofino. That sells better anyways to that kind of a crowd. We are here in Vernazza. But if you've been to the Cinque Terre now, you got all these boutique restaurants and wonderful little internet cafes and cutesy stuff. Back then, it was really rustic. There was just one little humble hotel and so on. Originally, our groups were just 8 people in a minibus. It was me and 8 people. I remember one time I booked a tour of Spain and Portugal, and I thought, well, minibus, 8 people, driver, 9 people. I got the bus, and it was 7 seats in the driver, somehow. And I had 8 paying customers meeting me tomorrow. So I had to go to a little restaurant, and I bought their stool, and I put it in the little hole near the door. And people had to rotate sitting on the stool every 7 days. But those were the old days. We can't get away with that now. But at first, it was just minibus tours, and then we got more people, and we got up to 16, and we then eventually got to 24 or 25 per tour. In the very early days, again, it was just me and 7 or 8 people in a minibus, and that's the perfect arrangement. If you ever want to run your own little business as a tour operator, or if you got a gang of friends that want to go economically, 8 people sharing a minibus, dirt cheap. Cheaper than train, cheaper than anything else, I think. It's once you hire a bus and a driver, then it gets complicated. You can make more money doing a minibus tour with 8 people than a big bus tour with 16. If you're going to do a big bus and have a driver and all that, you got to have 20 or 25 people to make it work. So from a complexity point of view and a viability business point of view, 8 people and a driver who functions as the guide, it's a beautiful thing. Originally, I just wanted to extend my ability to stay in Europe. I had bought a little house here in Edmonds. I needed to stay in Europe longer, and I just wanted to have a communal kind of thing. So in my talks, I'd say, I'm going to be taking a little bus around Europe. If you want to join me, it's $300 for the tour, and we'll all share the expenses once we get over there. And people would literally try out for a place to go on the bus. I would meet them here, and they could join my tour if I liked them, okay? And we'd come into town, and I had no idea where we were going to be that night, and I'd have no idea, obviously, where we're going to stay. We'd park in the main square, and I'd say, everybody fan out, find a good hotel, we'll meet back here in half an hour and compare notes. And that's how we did it. And every night we stayed in a lot of youth hostels, we'd pull out the maps, and we'd all debate what we're going to do tomorrow. And I would do this over and over and over again, and eventually I found myself settling into what really were the best itineraries, and those are the itineraries that we use to this day. So we had that very, very experimental, experiential way that we started the whole program. At first, I was doing all the driving, and the lecturing, and all the organizing. I wore all the hats, and I usually listened to music while I was drinking and driving. No, I didn't drink. But I would have it was generally women who took the tours, and I was just the driver, so I would put my own music on, and they'd be chattering away. And I was just like the servant almost, and it was an interesting sort of thing. Everybody would stay out late and get up early and sleep on the bus. It was such a cool challenge as a tour guide to arrange experiences for people. That's what it's, to this day, this would have been 1978 or something. What are we now? We're 35 years later or something like that. To this day, it is the experiences. Back then, if we're going through a famous oak forest in England, we would draw straws and let people sit up on the roof of the van just to be under the oak trees. I mean, hard to do that now, but we still try to have that kind of, I want to eat the wind as I'm going through Europe. I have a very strong ethic about keeping it simple and doing your own laundry and carrying your own bags. That was certainly the way we did back then in our minibuses. We would stay in youth hostels. This is the youth hostel in Gimmelwald. It's interesting now. My son is doing tours in Europe with students, and it's funny because he's the same age I was back then, and he's got the same situation as me. His tour program is organizing 3-day weekends for foreign study students in Europe, because when you go foreign study in Europe, you always get Friday off. So all the kids are wondering Thursday afternoon, where are we going to go? And the difference between now and my generation is now a student on a student's budget can fly to Dublin or Prague or Greece or anywhere for $30 if they know how to use the internet. I mean, you got these incredible cheap flights. Consequently, Andy can offer a $250 3-day weekend for his students, and they'll fly to meet him in Barcelona or wherever, which would have been unthinkable when I was a student. Andy, now when I look back on it, it's fascinating because he's very independent-minded, Andy, and we dragged him to Europe every year since he was was 1 year old, and he never showed any real interest or joy in it. And then when he graduated, I'm so excited about his passion for Europe, you know. And he's just a great tour guide. I got to pal around and be his assistant in Barcelona last year for a few days and watch him with his groups. But it's the same sort of thing. My groups were pretty much all women. His groups are pretty much all women. It's women that really want the adventure but need the safety of a group, I think. And he promotes his tours by giving talks at campuses all over Europe in their foreign study programs, free talks about how to travel, how to be a smart traveler. And by the way, I do tours. Here's my brochure. And that's what I do. You know, I'm going to Los Angeles tomorrow to give a talk. And you know, by the way, I have tours. Here's my thing. You can take a tour with us if you like. Andy is I've got F on this little jag because Andy keeps his group in this very youth hostel in Gimmelwald, where I kept my groups back when I was in my 20s. And it's a great opportunity to stay in a hostel and do your own cooking. Andy's there with 20 kids, and you go just across the street to the restaurant. You can't get a meal for less than $20 in Switzerland. He serves 20 kids all their meals for an average of $3 a day, you know, because he goes shopping and he does the cooking right there. And you know, that's how a tour operator can make some money. Have a minibus like I did, or cook the meals yourself in the youth hostel. And it's all possible if you know the ins and outs of that kind of thing. Way back then, we would stay anywhere in our accommodations. I made people sign a little agreement that said, if Rick cannot find a hotel, we will sleep on the bus and not complain. We don't do that anymore. But this is the notorious circus tent in Munich. They've got a wonderful circus tent in Munich for $3 or $4. You can sleep in there. You get all the mattresses and blankets you want, free tea in the morning, 400 roommates. It's a cross between Woodstock and a slumber party, you know. And I remember for me as a tour operator, this was great because I don't need to worry about reservations. Back then, reservations were tough. I had to get on the phone, very expensive, and I would spend the whole night from midnight until 8 during business time over there trying to set stuff up. And then, you know, you'd have to mail your check, and it was really a mess from a tour organizer's point of view. Here at the tent, it's always a place available. So we would come into Munich, have a great day, go to the beer hall, just have a wonderful beer hall time, and then just follow tram number 17. We would drive next to the tram track all the way to the end, and when you get to the end of the tram 17, there you find the big circus tent. We'd park there. I'd say, hi, do you have a spot? And they go, yeah. And they get, there's 8 of us. Okay. And they give me 8 blankets and 8 mattresses. So we'd corral all our stuff in this tent. You got the sound of Australians rutting over there in the corner, and it's just. And I remember thinking, this is so cool. And. But I also remember waking up one night in the middle of the night, and this sweet young lady who was on my tour, she was sitting up in her little blanket and kind of sobbing. And then I said, you know, Melody, are you okay? And she goes, Rick, I'm not taking this so very well. and I remember thinking, here, have a Valium, and I'll see you in the morning. So. I don't do that anymore. I don't think it's legal to give people Valium if you don't know them. But back then, that was all we had in our first aid kit, all right? But I do remember when I look back on it thinking, this sweet girl, she's sad that she's disappointing me, you know? And she really wanted to do the rugged thing, but it's stressful. And I remember I had this sort of crude interest in inflicting on comfortable, relatively wealthy on a global scale Americans, miserable accommodations, just so they would be thankful when they got home. I mean, I can do you a huge favor. I can make your simple little home a palace if you just go on one of my tours. And we would sleep in these incredible dumps, and people would be laying there wondering if there were any bugs, and why is this ripped, and is it dirty? And they would ask the hotelier, it's dirty, didn't you change the sheets this time? And he'd go, scusi, madame, and he would turn the sheet over. So that was my circus tent experience. We had a tradition of stopping in beautiful photo ops where we'd have a glorious picnic, and then we'd take a group photo with Mad Ludwig's castle or whatever. But for me, this was just luxurious. We had all the stinky cheese and all the fresh bread and all the beautiful fruit and so on there, and I could serve the picnics, and then we'd hike up to the castle and have a great experience. We were masters at picnics back then. It was nutritious, it was fast, It was profitable, and until just a couple of years ago, picnics were a very important part of our tour program. I like the healthy local produce. I like the expediency of it. And of course, you can eat very, very well, all you can eat, for a fraction of what you pay in any restaurant. We were very good at something we called rolling lunches. We would I'd say, do you want to stop for lunch, or do you want to save an hour and get into our destination? Everybody said, save an hour, we'll eat on the road. So we would delegate, and people would serve up the sandwiches, and we'd drive and eat as we went. We'd get there early, and we could go up to the top of the mountain before dinner, you see. That was the whole idea. We would do anything for experiences. I remember one day we picked up a hitchhiker on condition that he would teach us how to yodel. So this guy was great. I had one empty seat in the bus, and it was filled with girls anyways, and this guy really thought this would be a fun sort of thing for hitchhiking, and he stopped there, and I still remember, yo-tuli, yodelotio, 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 la la la, yodelotio, la 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 la, modulate, yo-tuli, yodelotio, and then accelerando, and that was it. I have never yodeled in public, okay? I'll never do that again. But that was a fun example of trying to creatively get an experience by introducing people and meeting locals, and that's critical to your travels to this day. We would drive down roads intending to have to ask questions, and we'd stop a shepherd who'd never seen another American, and maybe we knew the answer, maybe we couldn't understand the answer, but we just wanted to see the twinkle in his eye and hear his voice. And it was just thrilling to be able to do that, and you can do that to this day in your travels. Now, for years, it was only women that would take my tours. And I was sort of struggling with this, and time and time again, I'd have my I'd have my group, and clearly, these were adventurous souls that thought they just couldn't responsibly do it on their own, so they had the adventure with the safety of a small group. And we just had a lot of fun. Occasionally, a guy would sneak into the tour. I charged extra for men. And we became actually quite famous for our groups. We'd come into town, and the local men would be waiting for us. Like this guy here. Here we are. This is in Civita di Bagnoregio, near Civita, north of Rome, and there was the local soccer club, and we'd come in every 3 weeks, and they would say, well, Rick's group's coming, and all the guys would be there, the local soccer team, and we'd have a great time. We'd go down into the cantina, we'd have a jolly time, and my groups got bigger and bigger, and it just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And finally, it occurred to me, I've got to do something to accommodate the demand. And if you're got half a business brain, you think, okay, there's too much. I didn't want to I just had to figure out a way to do it. And it was clear I needed to figure out a bigger bus. And my friends felt so betrayed. Say it ain't so. You're betraying us all. You're selling out. You're going to just be another big bus company. But at first, we just had 16 or 18. And I'll tell you, as soon as I did that, it was much nicer because I could give my attention to the group instead of driving. I wasn't tired when I got into town after driving all day. Beautiful, high, scenic ride, much safer. and I had a microphone. I could talk to people. People could snooze. It was just a delightful thing. So we got into that. And also socially, if you got 8 people, if there's any sort of tension, everybody knows about it. When you have 20 people, you can have some tension and so on, but it's you just kind of steer clear of each other, and it's still a happy family. So there's many reasons that made sense to get bigger, and also, of course, if I could get the number up to 20 or 24, it could actually be profitable. The key was our big buses went on small roads. We went on roads that no other buses would go on. Many times we got, where we had to actually cut down branches to get ourselves out, or we'd find ourselves in somebody's yard. Excuse us. I remember ending up in a farmer's yard in Portugal. He had never had a tour bus just arrive in his yard. And this was a point of stress for a lot of my bus drivers. And I would love scenes like this. This is the Rothenburg parking lot. Now, when you come to Rothenburg in the middle of the day, it's literally hard to find a place to park the bus here in Rothenburg, just outside the wall, because there's so darn many tour groups in town. But at night, all the groups are gone, and we would spend the night. And I remember going back out to my bus in the late hours, and that was about the most beautiful thing in all of Europe for me. My bus, all alone in the tour bus parking lot, indicating my group was the only group in Rothenburg tonight. And I started to manage this idea that I could do big bus tours in the independent way. That's our challenge, and we do it to this day. We do things that big buses cannot do because of the way we're able to market our tours and select the people that take our tours. We've had great friends for decades in our tour program. This is Walter Mittler. I remember one day in Gimmelwald, we're staying at the youth hostel, and Walter said, why don't you come up to see my chalet, and maybe that's more comfortable for you. So I hiked up to see Walter's chalet. The first thing that happened was his dog bit me. This is the only time I've been bit by a dog. I got over that and became very good friends with Walter, and for 20 years we kept our groups in Walter's chalet, Hotel Mittdoghorn. I saw him just this last year. He's a beautiful man, and he's still serving travelers' needs. This is Senior Cereso, the only hotel in Vernazza for a long time. Senior Cereso, he's gone now. Most of these guys are passing away, and we've been with him for 30 years, and it's just, there's beautiful memories we've got with these guys. This is Angelino. We used to take our groups to Angelino's place, but then we had to stop. Angelino, that was Banyarejo with all the soccer team, and he just couldn't figure it out. Angelino, this is not okay. And time and time again, this sort of Mediterranean, it just occurred to me, Mediterranean, this macho thing, Mediterranean guys, it's just a whole region of horny bachelors, or not even horny bachelors, just horny men. And they chase, tourist women like dogs chase cars. It's just what they do. So we didn't go to Angelino's place anymore. But that is an amazing photograph right there, I think. The women and the wine of Italy. It's something that's been a big hit with our tours right from the start. Back then, wine was so cheap, and the easiest trick for a tour guide is just, lubricate your group. And anything going wrong, the wine's on us, And back then, it cost about $2, well, $1 for a bottle of wine. I remember just back in the Cinque Terre, not much tourism there. They hadn't figured out how to make much money, and it was just, wine was like water all over Southern Europe. A big challenge for us was bridging beyond just me doing the tours and having other guides. At first I thought only I can do a Rick Steves tour. That's a silly notion. I'm smart enough now to know that all of my guides do a better job in their specialty than I ever could. It's the most beautiful thing for me in my work is to realize that we can have specialists who are just as excited and very passionate about their work and do a job that blows people's expectations right out of the water. It was a big step for me to get to that point, and we had some very good guides in the beginning. Dave Herline still works with me. He makes all of our maps. Dave is just a beautiful man. Mike McGregor were our first two guides. And this was our first tour in Spain. The three of us went on that, and this was a big deal to break out of our Best of Europe route. And it was sort of the beginning. Now we've got 35 different itineraries. Our bus drivers became part of the family, and that's very important. And at Europe Through the Back Door here on 4th Avenue in Edmonds, we started to get serious. We actually had an accountant, and we just started to take our business a little more seriously. We would go to the travel shows. And in the very beginning, when they have a travel show, that's how a little tour operator would promote his stuff, right? And I would go to these, I would try to go to the travel shows. They say, what are you selling? And I would say, oh, we teach people how to travel without tours. Not at our travel show, okay? So I literally could not buy a table at the travel show in Seattle for $600 way back then when I was just teaching people to travel without tours. I used to write, my first newspaper column was for the Everett paper and the Bellevue paper. In the Bellevue paper, it was called The Budget Traveler. The travel agents that made that newspaper section possible through their advertising had a meeting with the editor and said flat out, we're not going to advertise in your newspaper anymore if you continue running a column called The Budget Traveler. We're not in the business to teach people how to travel on a budget. We need to get them to buy our cruises and all this kind of thing. So I had a meeting with the editor. In order to save the column, we changed the name. Instead of Budget Traveler, we decided to call it The Practical Traveler, okay? That was palatable. This is back in the 80s. But that was when things were really very defensive in the travel industry. Now the travel industry has matured, and they realize that people are going to travel independently, and it's a huge market. And people are, I'm just actually flying down to LA tomorrow to give a talk at the LA Travel Show, and they're paying me to give a talk there about how to travel without a tour, independently through the back door. So it's been a huge change, but originally we had a tough time even getting a table at a travel show. My dream was to take all of my library and all of my notes and make them available to the public right here on 4th Avenue in Edmonds, and finally finally, I left the piano sort of studio, and we made a library for our travelers, and we've got that to this day with a big fireplace and overstuffed chairs and a copy machine. If you don't want to buy a book, you can just photocopy a few pages, and we've got that place where people can let their travel dreams percolate and put things into focus. Big break for me was in 1989 or so, when a flurry of people started asking me if I wanted to make a TV show. And at first I thought, that sounds just like a wild goose chase and a lot of work. But I met a group of people who really, I felt, had their act together. And it was called Small World Productions. They were a Seattle group, and worked really hard. And we got our TV show off the ground, 1990. And ever since then, I worked with them for about 8 years. Then I got off on my own. And ever since 1990, every 2 years we've produced a new series, like clockwork. Every 2 years, 13 or 14 new shows. It takes 6 days to produce one TV show, 1.5-hour TV show, 6 days of filming in Europe, and then a lot longer than that once you get home with all the raw footage. But it's been a big use of my time, a big consumer of my time. My frustration in TV production is I don't learn anything about traveling. I just learned how to make people with jackhammers be quiet, you know, and that sort of thing. In the old days when I would do tours, I would spend most of my time just making money being a tour guide. And then I realized I need to marshal my time a little more carefully. I had good guides that could do the tour guiding. Now I do not do the tours anymore. I research the guidebooks. And while I research the guidebooks, I accidentally learned the tips and the ideas for my scripts for TV shows, and I spend 1/3 of my time making TV. 2/3 of my time researching guidebooks on my own, running around in Europe, just checking everything in the books, learning ideas for the tour program and the TV shows. 1/3 of my time making TV. I'm in Europe 4 months out of the year, April and May in the Mediterranean. I go home for June, and then July and August north of the Alps. If ever you're just going to be making TV in Europe, you want to have the sun out, Mediterranean springtime, north of the Alps summertime. If you're just traveling, that's the time to travel. So I really have that rut now, and it works quite well for me. But I am very thankful for public television. I mean, I think I've been good for public television, but they've been good for me too. And we have this nice sort of nice relationship, and I realize that it's a opportunity, a powerful opportunity for me to share my passion for Europe, and at the same time, it helps them with their raising money and all of this. Back then, it was 22 days. We had lots of different tours. All of them were just 22 days. I was on a one-man crusade to help Americans have a longer vacation. If you don't have 22 days, it's not worth going. Finally, my staff said, you know, if you want to sell tours, we're going to have to accommodate our itineraries to the shortest vacations in the rich world, the American vacation. If you've got a great Spain and Portugal in 18 days itinerary, and it's not selling, it's too long. So you got to make it 16 days. Every time one of our tours is not selling, my staff and I sit down and they say it's going to sell better if you shave off a day. It saddens me. And then you get Spain and Portugal in 14 days, and that's not doing anything justice. So what we have to do is be more realistic and just say Spain in 14 days, and then Portugal can be on its own, you see. But that's just the reality of our market. We have shorter and shorter vacations, and it's continuing that way. In the old days, people traveled longer. Now we travel shorter. The very first itinerary was Europe in 22 days, and that was the itinerary. This was the book, 1983. I had this book laying around in my lectures. I gave free lectures, and I was going all over the state giving these talks. No, I guess I might have been charging a few bucks for the lectures. Now, eventually I became to give the lectures free and sell my tours and sell my guidebooks and so on. But I had my tour handbook just laying around in the classes. This was a time when I'm very proud of my students. I didn't need to check their ID. Nobody ever bounced a check. They're all great people. But people were stealing this book. And I thought, you know, this book is driving decent people to theft. It needs to be available for purchase. They wouldn't have stole it if it was for $4.95. They would have bought it, you know? So I realized they want the handbook for the tour. The philosophy of the tour is we give you all this information so you can use your free time smartly, and so you're not just a dummy following like a bunch of sheep. You got the information, and you got a guide. They wanted just the information so they could do our tour without us, and I thought that's a great idea. So what I did was I beefed up that book, which became the handbook for my tours, 22 Days in Europe, and it was available for sale. Everything I knew about doing that tour was available for people who wanted to do it on their own. This was completely, aggressively honestly, everything we have about the tour is in this book. You can hire me to do it for you, or you can do it on your own. And it's been a lot of fun because it works both ways. The book is selling well and the tours sell fine. Eventually we had 22 days, and then my publisher said, make it not 22 days in France, but 2 to 22 days, so people feel like they got more options. But the point was, it dealt with people's time as a limited resource. Think about that. Back when Arthur Fromer was writing, it was Europe on $5 a day, or then Europe on $10 a day. He was taking care of people's money, right? Very important resource. I was recognizing, accidentally, I didn't plan it, but now I look back on it, I was dealing with the other resource, people's time. Europe on $5 a day, Europe in 22 days. I'm so tired of people saying you can spend a lifetime in Florence. Yes, I know, but I got 1.5 days. How should I use those days? That's what a guidebook needs to do. A person going to England wants to know Oxford or Cambridge. And it's refreshing for somebody who's been there to say, hey, if you got less than a month in England, don't do Oxford and Cambridge. They're both fine towns, but do one or the other and save up time for something entirely different. And Cambridge is better than Oxford. There you go. That's real information, Now, you could disagree with me, but you'd be wrong. I've got that sort of idea about where Americans are going to have the best time. So that's what this 2 to 22 day approach was. Eventually, we evolved out of that name, but it's still got that same spirit of using your time smartly. Your time is a precious resource. All of our guides we really, really are aggressive at getting the most out of your time. So our tour program expanded. We would have our Belgian buses deadhead all the way up to Norway for our Scandinavia tours. We did Turkey. I just met Melika Saval, who is one of my favorite tour guides ever. I met her on a tour that I took from Kusadasi. I was going out to Aphrodisias, and everybody was getting on her bus to the ancient site of Aphrodisias with beach balls and blankets. And she stopped the bus. She said, this is not a Fun in the Sun tour. This is not a beach tour. We're going to go back to headquarters and let you get off and go on another tour. This is a history and culture and art tour. I thought, whoa, all right, I'll be paying attention here, And she was so passionate about teaching. And I just said, hey, I'll bring a group to Istanbul next year, and we can do it with a bunch of Americans for 2 weeks. I didn't even know her beyond that, but I remember flying into Istanbul with 14 Americans. Melly met us at the airport. I would have been really in trouble if she wasn't there. We had the greatest trip, and that must have been 20 years ago, and we've been doing Turkey ever since. And it's something I'm just very, very thankful for is our tour Turkey program. We are really adamant about punctuality. We run a very tight ship on the tours. For a long time, we stayed in youth hostels. And we didn't care if somebody was not a youth. You're going to stay in a youth hostel. We finally gave that up, but we still tackle ruined castles and have our picnics and do a lot of things in a youthful kind of way. I love having enough time so that we can, if we see a friendly-looking cow, we can stop out there and be careful he doesn't lick us, okay? There's just all sorts of opportunities. We get to know the accordion player in the little village high in the Swiss Alps where everybody's got the same last name. We know the vintner on the Mosel Valley who loves to take you down into his cellar and tap a keg and pour your wine right out of the keg if you want that sort of experience. We know how to get Americans who are scared to death of raw hamburger to eat steak tartare, okay? It's a little bit of a trick, but it's fun to get people out of their comfort zone. I know the joy of getting, commandeering one of these vaporettos in Venice and having the group take over the whole front of the boat, and then to be able to bark out all of the information as we go through the town. Actually, that's not very practical these days, so I've taken that same spirit and put it into audio tours. And now we have free audio tours through our app. We've got about 40 different tours that are absolutely free. It costs you $50 a crack to hire a guide to give you all these tours in Venice, Florence, Rome, Paris, London, Amsterdam, Munich, Vienna, Athens, you name it. And now they're all in our app. If you or a friend is going to Europe and you want to have all these tours, again, they're absolutely free, and it's just a way that we can take the experience we've had as guides and help people enjoy that. A great dimension of a tour is the bus driver. The standard operating procedure for tour companies is to require that the guide and the driver eat separate from the group. The group comes to this rest stop, everybody goes over here for their whatever they're going to get for the group, and the driver and the guide go upstairs for a real nice meal. And the bus driver gets his click on his card, and if he comes again, he gets that bottle of Johnny Walker or that carton of cigarettes or whatever. It's that kind of a class society. We don't do that. Our guides eat with us, they park the bus and run to catch up with the group. They bring their wives with us on the tour sometimes. Sometimes guides have actually married our tourists. This man ended up marrying one of our tourists, okay? We can't promise that, but it has has happened. This is Dave Herline. That was our first guide, my first employee. We got 80 now. Dave's still with us. Dave, if you've enjoyed any of the maps and any of our material, Dave has written every map, and he has led every tour, and he's our amazing guy that knows the whole continent. And it's partners like Dave and many others in our office that make it possible for me to seemingly produce more than anybody could. I get to be the front person, but our staff is the hardest working staff, and they've all got the same passion and mission that I do. And Dave really taught me that we can train guides and have other people doing our tours just fine and dandy. This is Steve Smith, who Steve introduced me to France. He co-authors my France books. He gives all of our France talks. Steve runs our tour program now. I had a scary moment when I was running our tour program just out of my top drawer in my office, and one day I forgot to give one of our guides on a Spain tour money for the tour to pay for everybody's meals and stuff. And it occurred to me, oh no, money! I got to give the guide money, and he was already in Europe. So I thought, what am I going to do? I realized one woman on the tour was from Seattle, and she was leaving tomorrow. So I called her up. Her name is Robin, and I said, Robin, it seems kind of silly, but I forgot to give your guide money for your tour that you're going on. And I've got a little money belt that's got, like $20,000 in it. Would you mind taking it over to Europe for him? And she did, and that was a close call. But on another tour, I remember after the Turkey tour, everybody went to Samos, and I forgot to make the reservation for them. And I just thought, I'm not able to do this right. We're getting too big. So thank goodness I realized that before anything really bad happened. And Steve has since built our tour program, and now they took 12,000 people last year without a hitch. But I enjoyed many years guiding with my favorite guides, and for a long time our tours had two guides, the lead guide and the assistant. And here we're at a stop, pouring everybody their apple juice or their orange juice, enjoying a view with a Europe through the back door tour. We've realized that now we've got such a good, well-worn route, and we've got so many good local guides, we don't need a lead guide and assistant on our tours anymore, but that was our heritage for a long time. There's nothing so fun if you love history and art as sitting your group down on a bunch of broken stones from a column and right in the Forum and talking about the rise and fall of Rome. Can you imagine the joy of that as a teacher and as a student, to be there with a good teacher that knows how to make that happen? I love creative teaching. For instance, if you're going to go to a Gothic church, it makes sense to build a Gothic cathedral out of people, out of tourists, before you go into the actual Gothic cathedral. And as a tour guide, you can do it quite easily if you have a group. All you need is 13 tourists to illustrate what Gothic is all about, because Gothic was really a breakthrough from Romanesque. If you know Romanesque, you know that it's dark on the inside because the walls have to be heavy to hold the stone ceilings, right? And an architect knows that a round arch, like Romanesque, the weight of the stone roof sits squarely on the wall. If you point the arch up, I don't understand this, but everybody agrees, and I believe it. You point the arch up, the wall doesn't need to be so strong because the weight of the ceiling, because the arch is pointed, goes out. So what do you need? Buttresses. So you got your column supported by the buttress. The wall can be more of a skeleton of support, opening up lots of room for windows. Then you can have lots of big windows because the buttresses are supporting the stone ceiling, and you got glorious light inside the church. And right from the first page of the Bible, it's clear light is divine, and you want a lot of light inside the church. That was the glory of Gothic. So how do you illustrate this? You take your group and you ask for volunteers. We need 6 columns, so I'll be a column. I'll let you use your own imagination. A column here and a column there and 3 columns facing us. And then you explain to you, okay, you guys are the columns, and we're going to build a skeleton of support, because Gothic is a skeleton of support. We need ribs, and we're going to have pointed ribs. This arm is an arm for a human being, but it's a rib architecturally. There's no elbow. It goes up here. 4 arms coming together there, 4 ribs, and 4 up here. Okay, now you got your ribs coming up there, you got your columns, you got all this space in here for it to be windows instead of stone supporting your stone ceiling because you got pointed arches. And then you got your spire, a light person who's kind of strong who can put his hand here and hand there and hoist himself up. His weight pushing on those 8 arms coming together, those 8 ribs, because they are pointed, pushes the wall not down but out. So you need buttresses. And it's fun when you're a tour guide to ask for volunteers to be a buttress. Who wants to be a buttress? So you get 6 buttresses coming up, and each buttress stands tight against a column. And that's a normal buttress, but we want to have flying buttresses to have even more wall space. So the buttresses step back, and they've got arches flying in, supporting that column, which is supporting the ceiling. You got your buttresses in place. You got your column strong. You got your ribs. Now your spire hoists himself up, and you've got yourself a solid piece of architecture, Gothic. And if you're ever having a party and it's just not going over very well, you say, hey, let's build a Gothic cathedral, okay? There you go. So as a tour guide, you build a Gothic cathedral, you got your columns, your buttresses, and your spire. Now you walk into that Gothic cathedral, you look up there and you realize what's going on. Now that's just a fun way to teach something that puts a lot of people to sleep, and it makes a difference. You can take it too far when you're illustrating a battering ram, you know. But there's a lot of fun ways to teach your history and your architecture. Gene Openshaw was my buddy you saw on that very first slide. He graduated from high school with me, and he's been with us ever since. I get a lot of credit for doing a lot of great stuff with history and art, but Gene really is the brilliant genius when it comes to art and culture and history in our office. And Gene has been the man behind most of our tours and a lot of the history in our guidebooks and scripting of our TV shows for the art. And it's great to have Gene on board. Gene used to do a lot of tours. Now he's busy working on our guidebooks. It's quite a body of work, and we've got Gene going on that. Gene is my co-author for Europe 101, History and Art for the Travelers. We used to have a book called Mona Winks, Europe's 20 self-guided tours to Europe's 20 top museums, Europe's 20 most exhausting and obligatory sites, you know. And a lot of people loved that book, but we took it out of print because I just felt it was unfortunate to make people buy a whole book to Europe just to go to the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam or the Sistine Chapel in Rome. And what we did was we took all of those Mona Winks tours and we put them in the various city books. So now the difference between our country book and our city books is the city books has the Mona Winks tours in them. And then we've taken it one step further, and all of the Mona Winks tours are now available for free on the app, which makes more sense anyways, because if your eyes are like mine, you have to go down here and down there and refocus, and it's a drag. Much nicer to have me in your ear, and you can just go like that. Wow, this is really cool. I listen to my own tours all day long when I'm in Europe. I have to get used to it, but it is quite a luxury to not have to read when you're looking at all this architectural wonder. In the old days, we did whatever we could to help people's trips go smoother. We would have what we called a cash pack. Before the trip, everybody would have $10 worth of money or $20 worth of money from the 5 different countries on their tour. So you'd pay $100 and you'd get this little, you know, you'd get $98 worth of cash, and we'd pocket a couple bucks for the headache. And it was an interesting because we had all this cash, we'd give it to all our members. But then when we crossed a border, people could get their gelato right away. Typical tour bus stops at the border, you got this one rip-off bank, and you got 20 people waiting to change money at it. Horrible. We take that as a personal challenge. We don't need to. That's standard operating procedure for tour companies. Just say, go over there, get ripped off and change your money. We'll see you in half an hour. We don't want to do that. So we give you that 20 bucks, and then at your leisure the next day, you can change money smartly. Well, of course, these days with the euro and with ATMs, it's no longer a necessity to have your cash pack. We also used to do everybody's laundry. And I still wish we did everybody's laundry, but you tour guides are too busy with your art and history and all that kind of stuff, so that's great. But it is fun when you are doing a tour to have that efficiency where one person can suffer so everybody can have more time out and about. I just love these luge, this summer rodelbahn. You know, all over Europe they're trying to get more mileage out of their ski slopes because the ski season is shrinking, and you can go up in the ski lift in the summer, get on one of these things and go ripping down the mountain. It's a very big hit with our tours. We always remind people, don't let go of the stick. You're sitting on this thing, if you push the stick forward, the little pads come off the wheels and you go ripping down the mountain, pull it back, you stop. Push, go, pull it back to stop. If you wave at your partner to get your photograph, you're gonna lose your balance and you're gonna leave part of your elbow on the track. It happens every time. I've ruined several shirts doing this, but I know people who have lost part of their elbow. In fact, I was flying home one day after a long trip in Europe, just minding my own business. This woman sees me on the airplane. We're up over Iceland. She goes, Rick Steves, I love your book. And we did the luge, it was incredible, but come back here, I want to show you something. And I went back, and she said, my husband didn't follow your advice, and this is his scab. And he left it on the thing because he waved, you know. So you got to really pay attention of hanging onto your stick when you take that luge. And I never want to meet another person showing me their scab. Hiking in the Alps is one of the joys, stopping the bus to meet a friendly cow, staying in a hut like this. There's so much fun to be had high in the Swiss Alps. With our groups, we try to find these kind of characteristic hotels where here you're immersed in the wonder of the Lake District of northern Italy. We have our tours that are good for people, young and old, always young at heart. That's what we try to do. And we insist that our groups pack light. Nobody is allowed to take any more than this to start with. This is 9 by 22 by 14 inches. We don't care what people end the tour with. I love the heritage that we have here, Steve and me, with our picnic. For a long time, we organized these picnics and would eat out like this. If you're going on your own, that's clearly the way to get good, fresh ingredients, nutritious food, and not spend much money. Now we are so happy to have friends that run restaurants that are enthusiastic about catering to our groups. We used to keep people in Ratzenlagers, that's German for mattress lager, in a nature Freundenhut, a friends of nature hut, high in the Alps. They'd always have 20 mattresses upstairs that you could sleep in. I remember being in a mattress lager once, and it was all dark, and I came in and I took my place under my blanket in the Ratzenlager, and the German, in a very nice Rat Patrol accent next to me, said, "You're climbing into the germs of centuries." This is Walter's Hotel. This is the kind of hotel we made our mark staying in, and we still try as much as we can to stay in hotels with this kind of character. A lot of times we will have no elevator, and you got to climb up, and there's the group ready to make the climb, but they're right on the Grand Canal in downtown Venice. We have beautiful people that run our little mom and pop hotels, and right from the start, we've been very busy getting information together for our travelers. As I mentioned, I spend most of my time running around in Europe looking at all sorts of places that never get into the guidebooks. People say, all you just talk about is show things on sunny days and talk about great places, but you do a lot of missing for every hit. And I think part of the job of a guidebook writer is to miss and miss and hit and miss and hit and miss and track down all those leads, and then design the hits into a very carefully organized piece of information so your travelers can hit and hit and hit every time. That's the rationale of a guidebook, and that's what I love about my work. I get to go on all the stupid rides in Europe. This is one of those Disney kind of things in England, somewhere, but if there's a ride, I have to take it because it's going to be advertised and your hotel's going to be pushing it, and I need to know if it's worth your time and your precious vacation money. I learned all of the lessons the hard way. I remember renting a bicycle in Amsterdam from this friend of mine who's in my book, and he said, "Look at me and take this seriously. I want you to lock the bike, not just the wheel, you lock the frame and the wheel to the metal hitching post, okay?" So for 5 days I had the bike, and every day I locked the frame and the wheel to the hitching post. My last day I thought, I'm tired, I'm just gonna lock the wheel to the hitching post. The next morning I came out to get my bike, and there it was, the wheel was left locked to the hitching post. I had the indignity of walking with my wheel back to the bike rental place. And I told him I didn't lock the frame to the thing. And he said, "I won't charge you for the bike as long as you promise every time you give a talk about Amsterdam to warn people, lock the frame to the hitching post," okay? So there you go. It's so much fun to get over there, get caught up in the history, and to get caught up in the story of it, to get caught up in the stinky cheese. And then, after all these years, I still love nothing more than to spend a whole busy day out there researching, come back to the funky little hotel room and find a place to put my laptop and type all that information into the book and get those books up to date. I get to meet all sorts of cool people in my travels. This man is Armin Walsh. He must be the Indiana Jones of Tyrolean archaeologists, okay? He's got so much energy. All he wants to do is find ruined castles, renovate them, and turn them into museums for travelers to understand their history. To meet people like that and to be able to connect our groups with them is wonderful. And if I bring enough groups to a town like that, they actually knight me. I got knighted there at the castle in Reuter in Austria. This is Andy, our boy, who's 25 years old now, but he reminds me of the youthful, young at heart joy of enjoying all of the great history and art and fun of Europe. And here's Andy and me hanging onto that stick very carefully. And now he's on his own in Europe, and I'm very proud of him. He's doing a great job. He's in Rome today trying to get people to take his tour, okay? He's giving a talk just like this to a bunch of students. Here's Andy illustrating what we think is the telltale sign for a good, smart restaurant. What I always say, if you're looking for a good restaurant, find a handwritten menu that's not very big in one language. handwritten because it's going to change depending on what's fresh in the market this morning. Small because they're only going to cook up what they can sell and offer economically. And in one language because they cater to locals, not tourists. They love tourists, but they're not going to cater to you. You're not going to get fondue in Switzerland in the summer in a good restaurant. No Swiss person would have fondue in the summer, you see. So you want to eat with the season. Americans seem to want, they almost seem as our right to be able to eat anything any time of year. The Europeans know that the best way to control nature is to obey it, and they will eat with the season. So we're working hard as ever. We got 80 people at Europe through the back door. Our guidebooks are expanding. They used to be little, they're getting bigger, and now this Italy book is 1,000 pages, and we've been going to people like this ever since, we've got lots of years of Christmas cards on the walls. We've got our phrase books, our TV shows, our maps, our city guides, our country guides. When it comes to art, we know that museums can ruin a good vacation. So we know that you've got a limited attention span, a limited amount of energy. So we work hard in our material to make it fun and accessible. That's what Europe 101 is all about. Designed for smart people who were sleeping in their history and art classes before they knew they were going to Europe. Now you got a trip coming up and you wish you remembered who those Etruscans were, okay? This is a way to make up for all that lost time and just understand the basics of European culture. For me as a teacher, it is so gratifying to find student groups over there in Europe with teachers who've equipped their kids with this book, and they're having that great on-the-road educational experience with the help of our guidebooks. Our tour program, as you know today, if you've been to any of our programs, is booming. This is our best year ever. We took about 400 tours. This is the basic tour that I was doing back in the 1970s with my minibus, and it is the same as we do today. I just absolutely love this best first 3 weeks in Europe. If that's what you're looking for, 3 weeks in Europe, that's your best introduction. Obviously today we do a lot of tours. You can learn about all those tours on our website. Our radio show is something I really enjoy. It's so much fun to be the curious questioner with all these great guides and writers that get to come into our studio here and then broadcast it throughout the United States, bringing it to a lot of communities where the people might not travel that much, and we can bring that better celebration of the world right into their towns. Our app works beautifully, and remember that when you're going over to Europe for your next time. And I've been working with Simon for 12 years now. He's been with me for 600 days in Europe making TV shows. We've made 100 shows together, and I can't imagine making a TV show without Simon with me in Europe. We have the smallest crew in the game. There's just 3 of us. Me, the cameraman, and the producer. And we're able to produce TV as well as people with huge crews, I think. It's sort of the ethic of public television. We have to do it on a shoestring. We do it in a guerrilla kind of way. And we do it thanks to a lot of beautiful support from public television viewers around this country. This is Carl, who shoots most of our shows, and Simon. We're going to be going to Israel. We're going to go to Egypt. We're going to go to Palestine. And we're going to go to Turkey in the next year, filming in all of those places. And we had a lot of fun taking America through public television to Iran a few years ago. And we're very excited about now going to the Holy Land and looking at Israel and looking at the West Bank, not in a, who's right and who's wrong kind of way. We're going to steer clear of politics unless you think politics is just humanizing a group of people who have kids and have grandparents and really have aspirations and the same concerns we do. We want to learn about Palestine and the West Bank, and we're going to do it thanks to public television. It's something you wouldn't be able to do in commercial television, that's for sure. So that's our next project, and we're going to work on that starting tomorrow. This is Armin Walsh, our friend in Tyrolia, taking us up to one of his castles. This is me trying to remember my lines in front of the castle in Salzburg. This is Peter sitting on we have to improvise. We don't have money for a dolly or any sort of a truck. We just hire a taxi and see how much patience he's got as we sit on the trunk and I ride the bicycle behind. And even if this guy's got a bumper sticker that says "Kill your TV," we're doing an on-camera there about how it's nice to be out biking in the Dutch countryside. Here we're eating cactus fruit in the Cinque Terre. Our groups, one of the joys of our groups, I think, is the kind of people who choose to travel with us, and that's shaped by how we market the tours. We have a kind of a quirky way of marketing the tours, and it attracts people that are a lot of fun to be with. Our guides know how to make the art fun. Here we have our lead guide, Rick Garman, like a lot of you guys up there, who is taking the whole tour, but he knows when to stand back and let our local guide, this is Hansa, who co-authored my book, or basically wrote the book on Prague, and Hansa is our expert in Prague, and here we are in Prague, which won its independence 20 or 30 years ago with Hansa. And Hansa tells us about that exciting week when the Czech people won their freedom from the Soviet Union. We're standing in front of the president's palace. And you can read it in a book and it's exciting, but here's Hansa, who was there with 80,000 Czech countrymen gathering in front of their communist dictator, all of them jangling their keychain, looking up at the president saying, it's time to go home now. Get your keys and get out of here. 8 nights in a row they gathered, 80,000 strong. And finally they gathered, jangled their keys, and the dictator was gone, and the Czech people had won their independence. Oh, baby, just sharing that gets me all excited, but to be right on that spot with a man who was there, who lived under communist tyranny and now is enjoying freedom, it's a thrill. And that's that's what we aspire to do as guides, is bring you a little dose of real history, because history is now, history is real people, and when we travel, we can gain a better understanding of that. That's why I sign up for our tours, as I mentioned, every year. This is just me last year on our Turkey tour, enjoying a great experience with a couple of other travelers from our group. We got all carried away with Turkish culture. We actually went out to the market and bought all these baggy pants in the market. And then our guide said, you know, those are women's pants. We walked all the way through town to some lady's house for dinner, and the kids were acting so strange. They were giggling and pointing. And then we realized we're a bunch of goofy Americans wearing women's baggy pants in their town. But that's okay. We're having a good time in Turkey. In my work as researching my guidebooks, I'm always running into our groups. I don't even keep track of where our groups are, but I'll tell you, every time I find them, they're about that many happy faces. And those happy faces are a testament to the great job that their guides are doing. It's the happiest day in the year for me is when I dedicate a day to reading the feedback from all of the people who trusted us with our vacations and see what a great job our guides are doing. Steve Smith is working very hard to connect salt to the earth people, just like I've been working, so our tour programs know where to stay in Europe, and that's what we're all about at Europe Through the Back Door. Our first passion is for equipping people to travel independently. And I know that if you equip yourself with good information and expect yourself to travel smart, you can. But I also know it's really great to relax on that bus, let somebody else do the driving and worry about parking, know that you got a good hotel figured out, know that there'll be a little meal waiting for you at the end of the tour, there's going to be a great guide up at the castle, and tonight they've lined up some nice musical entertainment after dinner. That's sort of the other side of the coin, and you can get the best of both worlds. The challenge and the adventure and the education of going on your own, and the economy and the efficiency of taking a group tour if you play it right. And that's our goal at Europe Through the Back Door in our tour program. These are the kind of travelers that are using our books, having a great time. My enthusiasm and confidence is based on the feedback I get from travelers, many of whom's grandchildren said you shouldn't be doing this. And they go over there with no language skill, with no experience, without a lot of money, have the time of their life, and come home with money in the bank for next summer's trip. You know, if you want to travel this way, you can. That's the good news. And what we are interested in is in finding those experiences. I have the joy now of going out there and finding those experiences. They're not always experiences that I would recommend, but there are great experiences, and I'm looking for them, and then I'll take home my favorites and be sure to incorporate them into our tours. Just last year I was in Switzerland. All my life I've been going up to Gimmelwald. There's this huge cliff. I don't know if you know that cliff, but it's like thousands of feet straight up. And then they've got this thing called the Via Ferrata, the Iron Way. And it's a cable that's 2 kilometers long, and every 10 yards or so there's a pin into the mountain. And you put on those carabiners, right? And then you go along this cable, literally on a cliff. This was about the most comfortable place. But many, many times it's just rebar going out, and you step from one rebar to the next, and you're pinned to this cable, and it's straight up, and it is straight down. And I mean, there's cows 1,000 feet below you. I was so scared, and I wouldn't do it without a guide. We had a guide, and he kept looking at me like, when's he gonna pass out, you know? And you couldn't die because you got 2 carabiners, so you slide it along, you unclip one, clip it on the other side of the pin, you move over, you unclip that and clip it there, and then you slide along some more. But still, when I finished that, I was so relieved and so exhilarated, and for the next 5 nights I would wake up clutching the mattress. I'm not into adventure sports, but there's those kind of experiences that are out there, and it's just nice to know that you can choose whatever level you want. But that's an interesting option when you are in Gimmelwald in Switzerland. For something much more easygoing, you can know about going up to the greatest pipe organ loft in Europe. Any Sunday after the first Mass, a little door in the back of the San Sulpice Cathedral opens up. There's a bunch of in-the-know organ enthusiasts and tourists with my guidebook. The door opens. They scamper up that little spiral staircase like 16 notes. They meet Daniel Roth, the greatest living organist in Europe, who warms the same bench as a whole lineage of great organists, Vidor and guys that, if you're an organist, are our household word names, back for 200 years, back when they had men going on these treadmasters to power the bellows. Now they just turn on the electricity. But you sit there at the organ with this incredible man and hear beautiful, glorious music powering the spirituality of that church, and it is breathtaking, and that's the kind of experience you can have too. And there's all these different ways to experience Europe. You can meet living legends in Europe. This is Malcolm Miller, beautiful man who for 30 years has been giving tours at Chartres, the greatest Gothic cathedral. And Malcolm is there to this day, taking tourists lovingly through his church, and with a beautiful intellectual Scottish accent, reading each window to you. I just love Malcolm Miller, and people like that have inspired us in our teaching. We want to give you a comfortable base to really experience Europe and understand those beautiful aspects of the culture. We want to inspire you to meet the people. Again, if you see 4 cute guys sitting on a bench, ask them to scoot over, okay? I've been saying this for 25 years, and it works beautifully, okay? There are plenty of ways, even in this modern age, that you can meet the traditional salt-of-the-earth people. You can find traditional culture being celebrated in Europe. They'll carve a wooden shoe for you. The museums are better designed than ever to share their beautiful art. The traditional world survives vividly if you know where to find it. That's our challenge in our travels, to find those offbeat nooks and those backdoor crannies. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks. Thanks, you guys. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you. Nice to be here. I just want to take 5 minutes. I mean, if you have to go, it's late, but I finished 4 minutes under what my maximum time for talking was, so I think that's okay. If there's any questions, any curiosity I stoked or something like that, yeah. On your tours. Are we still doing picnics on our tours? Not in a formal way. We on occasion, we like to get together and make a picnic. It's fun to let different people go help shop for it and so on, but it's not the meals that we include anymore. Yes? You still play the piano? I love to play the piano. I've got a house right up on a bluff. I'm so happy where I am right now. I've got this house of my dreams with what used to have a dining room table, but that's the first thing that went. My grand piano goes there. I can look out over this beautiful town of Edmonds and play my favorite music. I wish I learned more, but I'm thankful my mom and dad made me practice, and I have a lot of fun playing the piano. In the back.
I'd like to hear some feedback perhaps from the Iran program that you did.
We did the Iran program 4 or 5 years ago, and it's about the most gratifying thing next to helping legalize marijuana that I've ever done in my life. Isn't it funny how far we've come in drug policy? My Iran program was just the right thing to do for a travel writer from the United States who happened to have a TV show. And I realized America knew about as much as Iran as I did, which I learned from Ted Koppel. And I thought it's more complicated than that, and we could go to war with Iran. And I thought I can go over there with my crew and make a 1-hour special, and it would air because I'm in public television. It would never air on commercial television. And as you probably know, I didn't want to politicize it unless you think humanizing the enemy is being political. I just wanted to understand those people. I firmly believe that it's good character to know people before you bomb them. You know, sometimes you have to bomb people. I'm not some sort of complete pacifist, but boy, I'm a taxpayer in this country, and I think it's just right to understand that every bullet that flies and every bomb that drops has my name on it. Yeah, there's 200,000 refugees right now whose little kids are barefoot in a winter mud puddle on the border of Afghanistan because 16 guys wanted to mess us up. 200,000 victims right now. We don't even know who they are. They're dying right and left. I mean, there's no easy solutions, but we do, if we're good people, need to take a little responsibility for this and not blot it out of our minds. So Iran was my opportunity to go there and understand a little of the complexity of Iran, and it was quite exciting to be steep on the learning curve, take my film crew, bring it home. One of the great joys for me was going to screenings all over, and sit there with 500 people watching the show, and to be able to look at Persian Americans, beautiful people who have never seen their country anything other than a caricature of scariness. And they've got some problems, and we've got some legitimate concerns and gripes and all this kind of stuff with Israel. I don't question that. But to humanize Iran to attempt to do that was just a real honor and a thrill. And I didn't get any bad feedback. A few people said I was a Jane Fonda mouthpiece of the enemy, but they're the people that think we should lock up pot smokers too. So. But you got to do what you think is right, and I have a nice little platform and a good gig with public television, and I've got a film crew. I didn't wait around to see who would pay for that. I just paid for it myself. That's that's one of the joys of having a successful business. If I want to go to Palestine, I don't need to find a corporation who will underwrite it, because there's no corporation that would. But I can go there, and with our guerrilla way of producing, I can produce something that's as good as anything else being produced, and it'll air in every city in this beautiful country of ours, thanks to public broadcasting. Okay. Any other questions? Yeah.
Expand your My Way tours?
The My Way tours, for 20 years, I've been scheming about how can we take the efficiency of our tours. We got the bus route, the efficiency of the bus, all these great hotels, and make it accessible to people who don't want to spend the money for a fully guided tour. And we used to do something called untours. We did bus bed and breakfast tours. We tried all these things. None of them ever really clicked for some reason. But my very hardworking and smart staff has figured out, in conjunction with our guides, a way to do these My Way tours that are $1,000 less expensive and perfect for people who just want the efficiency of the tour and take advantage of all of the material we've got that lets you be a smart traveler without the help of an actual tour guide and without the expense of it. You can do it at your own pace and so on. And the My Way tours, they're called My Way, and we started out just with the best of Europe, and this year we're doing a few more of them. They've been quite popular, and I think we're going to build on that. And it's just such an efficiency to be able to have one guy driving 25 people instead of 25 people renting cars or using train passes and worrying about parking and all that sort of thing. And it's a lot of fun. So stay tuned. We've got some good My Way tours coming up as halfway between independent travel and fully organized travel. That's great to hear. Thank you. Yeah. Yes? Have I thought of going to the Ukraine or Russia? I've been to Russia a couple of times, and I would love to go to Russia with our TV crew. I'm not going to do tourism there. I'm not going to do an organized tour there in the foreseeable future. And I'm not going to make a TV show until Russia gets a little more progressive or proactive about making it safe and straightforward for tourism. They still are run by in-tourists, and they haven't figured out that those days are over. And it's just a real complex, difficult thing to travel in Russia compared to Poland or Hungary or Latvia or Lithuania or something like that. I just have to be careful I don't overreach what I'm good at, and Russia's not my thing. But as soon as they get with it, with convenient tourism like Europe style, I've got a couple of scripts I'd love to do, but I don't have any plans for that yet. Yeah.
It's interesting to hear that India is your favorite country. You seem to be moving in that direction. Do you ever plan on doing anything with India?
Do I ever plan on doing anything on India? I always mention India as my favorite country. No, I'll never do anything professionally on India. I mean, I'll write on it if I ever go there again. I've got this odd problem. I mean, I've got so much fun in Europe, and I go away from home 4 months out of the year, and I'm always in Europe. I occasionally go to Central America or Pacific Rim or Southeast Asia, but if I have 2 weeks, I'd really rather make my Portugal book better. Thousands of people are going to use it than go to India and have a good time myself. I'm just in that mode right now where I've got a mission, I've got a great staff, I've got all sorts of fun opportunities to make TV shows. But I want to really be careful that I stay focused. And there's people that would be much more smart about India than me. But I'll tell you, it's a great place to travel, that's for sure. Yeah.
I have 3 sons, and I think they'd love to get in touch with your son in Europe and connect. How do I do that?
He's got 3 sons, my son's age, love to get in touch. If you're curious about my son's work, his company is called Weekend Student Adventures. And the website is WSA for Weekend Student Adventures Europe.com. If you just Googled Andy, A-N-D-Y, Andy Steves, you'd find him. But Andy is working very, very hard. He's got a beautiful website, and he takes hundreds of kids around Europe on these $250 3-day weekends. And it's just a great little niche he's got. Thank you for asking. Yeah?
Are you going to add Slovakia to your tour?
Am I going to add Slovakia to the tour? That's a very good comment. You know, Czechoslovakia divided, and you got Czech Republic and Slovakia. I'm a sucker for the Czech Republic. Prague, I absolutely love. Honestly, I mean, my own shortcoming is I don't understand Slovakia, and it's a charming place, and people who go there say, I'm really missing the boat, and it's something we'd like to do. I have to be concerned about the reality of, are people going to go there? Slovakia, great as it is, if you wrote the best book to Slovakia, you would starve to death. You know, it's just, there's no market, and this is a big problem. It's just, there's a reality. You know, why isn't there a good book for accessible Europe? It's a very important thing. There's no market. You know, I made a book called Accessible Europe, and it sold in the hundreds. It was a great book, but it's expensive to make a book. I have a book on Scandinavia, and it's only there because I'm Norwegian. You know, it's a great book. I've given it a pound of flesh. I've been working on it for 20 years, and it sells one for every 20 books my Paris book sells, and it's the best-selling book in the market. It's not an underperformer. I'm just kind of spoiled, and I want to really move some books if I'm going to work as hard as I do on a book in Slovakia. Sorry, it's just not going to cut it. So, if you want to do Slovakia, I will guarantee you that territory. All right. Any other questions here? One more question. Yeah.
Where's the next Cinque Terre?
That's a very good question. Where's the next Cinque Terre? You know, I always have, in the same vein of what I was just talking about, I have to figure in how many people are going to actually go there. The beautiful thing about the Cinque Terre is it's exotic. It's not as touristy as it should be because you can't get big buses there and so on because of the terrain. You can't almost drive to a lot of the places. But it's just 1 hour away from Pisa. So, and 3 hours away from Florence. So it's easy for anybody who wants to go there to go there. I'm sure there are places, if you like Italian-style places, down in the south. Basilicata, I was just talking with one of our guides on the radio yesterday on the instep of the boot, you know. It sounds fascinating, and there's no tourists there. Lepardi Islands off of Sicily. Every indication is that's every bit as magic as the Cinque Terre, and it's way down there. Now, my problem is if I wrote a great thing on the Lepardi Islands, it's just not accessible like the Cinque Terre. So I have to factor in how many people are going to use my material. So I'm not really a photo adventure journalist that's going to take you down to the source of the Nile, you know. It's got to be within easy striking distance of Paris or something like that. And the Cinque Terre is that good mix. A lot of people can go there, and it's quite exotic. I would say the next Cinque Terre, certainly not the Amalfi Coast. I'm not that hot on the Croatian coast compared to the Cinque Terre and the Amalfi Coast. I think it's probably in the deep south of Italy, you know. I like the south coast of Portugal too, but you know, Europe is quite discovered these days compared to when I started. So to be honest, all of my back doors are back doors in relative terms. It's hard to find really undiscovered stuff that's really great in Europe. What I want to do is give you a backdoor look at a great place like Paris or Rome, and that's very reasonable. If you go here, Philip Roth, in the St. Sulpice Cathedral, that's a back door, no tourist at all, just organ enthusiast. It's free, it's culture, it's Paris, you see. All over Europe, you can find that. Time and time again, you can find that. You can go to Istanbul and just play backgammon with people in some neighborhood that's never seen a tourist. And that's a back door, and anybody can do it. I've had a long day. All right. I want to thank you so much. Yeah. Thanks a lot. Happy travels. Thank you, guys. Ciao. Buon viaggi.